Project Atla, Episode 3 The Relative. Dareth found himself at the table with the extended relatives of the royal family. Being the great uncle of the current monarch did come with benefits. Dareth was in charge of logistics for two of the closest planets to Atla. By being in charge of logistics, that meant he simply collected his small percentage every time a ship docked at the two planets. The first planet was nearly covered in water, so there was plenty of activity for the current expansion project that was underway. The general populace called this expansion many things, but to the royal family, this decree was the Men Among Stars initiative. This planet, called Polera, did not hold many people on planet, just workers that helped to maintain the outflow of water. The other was Varen, a rocky planet that didn't have many resources. Dareth, being the cunning uncle that he was, utilized the planet as a logistics hub, allowing ships to drop their resources off, refuel, and not have to make a full trip to Atla from the distant lands. "How are the roads these days?" asked a distant great niece of the king in a mocking tone. "Make your 5 silver opening the gates for those doing the real expansion work?" Comments like this solidified Dareth's feeling towards his lot in life. Close enough to power to get the benefits, but not close enough to wield it. Being the great uncle of Yvonne, Dareth was around for the time of Alfred and his shaky reign. The great niece's comments continued, and Dareth started to get a headache. Maybe I should have carried out the trading guild's plan during Alfred's reign, he thought to himself. When Alfred was looking at the lowest of his power, there was a conspiracy started known as the Fracturing. Some of the highest members of the trading guild were seeing the continual decline of their profits as Alfred slowed expansion and brought all the resources back to Atla. They reached out to the regional governors, especially those in the distance lands who were feeling the most pain. Their goal was to remove Alfred and replace the monarchy with a council-based government. The members of the trading guild would oversee the economic policy, while the regional governors would oversee the social policies. The plan was not only just discussed, it was put in place and started to get movement. The guild started recruiting mercenaries and negotiating treaties with more regional governors. The plan was moving along smoothly, but the guild made a costly mistake. Because of Dareth overseeing Varen, he had built a solid foundation with the trading guild. He was much younger back then and more heavily involved. Dareth would sometimes tip off the guild of edicts coming out of Atla so the guild could protect their assets. Some of the higher-ups within the guild could feel Dareth's disposition with Alfred and thought he could be a good ally. The guild knew it couldn't strike Atla head-on. Their plan was to land on Varen, take control of the planet, and maintain the inflow and outflow of resources to Atla. Atla would no longer be able to sustain its population, and the guild would be seen as liberators coming to save them from the monarchy. Dareth was approached with this plan and became a key player of the Fracturing. Dareth told the guild that he would need some time to make a decision. He knew if he immediately went to Atla, it would be suspicious, so he went to Polera to isolate himself to ponder this. The scenes of revolution continued to play in his head. If the guild went forward with this plan, he knew there would be plenty of casualties, mostly of the general populace of Atla. The king was not an evil man, but he would prioritize his family over all the people on planet. He also thought of his time with the trading guild, knowing the greed at the top level was more extreme than anything in the Day-Alt line. He knew this would not lead to paradise, but rather was the play of greedy people being advantageous. Dareth knew what he had to do. He sent an encoded message back to Alfred about the plan and returned to the guild, letting them know he would go along with it. The guild brought their mercenaries to Varen and were quickly dealt with, as Alfred had time to prepare. The trading guild members and the regional governors were taken to trial and jailed, but Dareth knew deep down that they had not imprisoned all of the conspirators. Well, what did this loyalty get him? Sitting with the rest of the family while they fight for scraps? Dareth continued to ignore the rest of his family and enjoy his meal. It was the night before the parade to celebrate Yvonne's 10-year reign, but he wasn't feeling very festive. As some time passed, the main door opened and Yvonne and his guards entered the hall. All of the family stood up to show their respect. Family, thank you all for attending this event tonight. It is important that we remain a strong family unit, because if it was not for the familial bond, the day-old line would not be here today. Yvonne raised his glass. To Dareth, your efforts will never be forgotten by this family as long as we reign. Everyone lifted their drinks and Yvonne left the room. As the guards were filing out, one approached Dareth, inviting him to follow the band. When Dareth followed the guards, it led him to Yvonne's private chamber. Inside his chamber, there were two displays. The first being the day-old coat of arms, and the second was a slideshow showing the succession of the day-old line. Uncle, Yvonne immediately hugged Dareth. This is the first time he had been alone with his great-nephew in nearly a decade. I brought you here so I can tell you why I've been keeping my distance, because you of all people deserve to know. Just with this conversation alone, Dareth could see the leader that Yvonne had become. He wasn't the weak man he saw when Alfred was on the throne. Of course, nephew, I have the utmost trust. You are doing everything to ensure the success of our family. It was nice for him to speak truthfully after an evening spending time with his extended family. I've been keeping my distance not to alarm those who still wish for the fracturing to occur. Suddenly, the last few years started to make sense to Dareth. The 3 layers of bureaucracy between the two of them, Dareth was brought to tears, realizing that he was still a valued member of the family. I cannot bring you into my inner circle publicly, but you will be one of the few people to know what is truly happening. You have heard of Rurik's expedition on Vikith. Dareth nodded. The real reason for the expedition is there's a material underground that will allow us to build weapons that can annihilate a single planet. Rurik has discovered the material, but we are having trouble getting it off planet. You know, I do not wish to utilize this power, but given there are rumblings of a second fracturing occurring, I must take proper measures to consolidate power. This news shocked Dareth. Not only the fact that Yvonne was attempting to get this weapon, but the trading guild was once again in the shadows. Dareth had regained favor with the guild in the last few years, but he knew he would never have the relationship they had previously. Dareth was pale white, but he regained his composure. How did you discover such a material, Yvonne? I was reviewing the notes from each of the monarchs about 200 years ago. They discovered the planet but closed it off after learning of the material for fear of it getting into the wrong hands. Yvonne, if the goal is to subdue the trading guild, why is Rurik there? Rurik is sifting through the ranks to determine who is truly loyal to the family. Well, isn't he working with them directly? Won't they know what the material is? I have him splitting science duties with the Inferno Guild, and they have been long loyal to the Day-Old family. Yvonne saw the concern in Dareth's eyes. Rest easy, uncle. I can assure you we have been working to ensure we only find success in this mission. Familia mea officium meam. This was the family motto of the Day-Old line. My family, my duty. Dareth repeated the motto back to Yvonne, and they embraced one more time. Lastly, uncle, I must ask you one thing. Once we have worked out the removal of the material, could we entrust your kin to oversee Vikith? Dareth smiled and nodded. He was not the monarch of Atla, but in the distant lands, he could be the ruler of the most important planet in the galaxy. Project Atla is written and produced by Elsie Caldwell. Thank you.